When I was 16 years old, I would nanny for 2 boys, Brandon, who was 8, and Randy, who was 15. Randy had mental health problems because he was born with fluid in his brain, or something like that. Either way, he was a sweetheart, but you could tell something was off by the way he walked and moved his hands. They had a dog, Gunner, who was an Akita and yellow lab mix. This dog was huge and very protective. I watched the kids every other week, all day, Monday through Friday. Gunner watched everything I did during the first week. I had to gain this dog's trust. That first week, the dog made me uneasy because if I was with the kids and they started being loud and rambunctious, he would get between me and the boys and start growling, even if I wasn't playing with them and just happened to be near them. Gunner learned to trust me really quickly, though. There were 2 times that Gunner saved our lives. Story 1. The boys lived in a rough neighborhood. Not scary, just rough around the edges. We went for a walk to the playground a couple of blocks away, and a white van slowed down by us. There were a bunch of guys yelling at us from the window, saying inappropriate things to me because I'm a girl and calling Randy horrible names about his condition. "Just ignore them, guys," I said in a hushed voice as I shifted and put myself and Gunner between the kids. Gunner didn't take his eyes off the van. The tension pulled the fur on his back straight up, signaling that he was in protective mode. As the men kept yelling at us, I pulled my phone out and started dialing 911. But I didn't hit send before Brandon started yelling back, defending his brother. Then everything happened so fast. The sliding back door of the van opened and 2 men jumped out. "Run!" I remember screaming at the boys, just as Gunner ripped himself free from my grip on his leash. Everyone started running except me. The boys sprinted home, the dog sprinted towards the van, and I frantically tried dialing 911. Gunner chased the men back into the van, nearly grabbing the leg of one man, and they sped off. Gunner received a lot of treats and praise when we returned home. Story 2. This one really freaks me out. I was allowed to have friends stop by since I practically lived there, and the boys liked hanging out with my wholesome teenage friends. If a male friend came over, though, I would have to go outside and hug them where Gunner could see and talk to them for a few minutes on the porch. Gunner would assess them. Normally, he let them inside without trouble after that. There was one friend he wouldn't let inside without coaxing. Gunner would never bite anyone unless actually attacked, just for context. One day, a man came to the door. He knocked and said he had to drop something off for their mom, who was supposedly expecting it. We could see through the window that he seemed like a gentleman and was very nice. But as I approached the door, Gunner cut me off. He started barking at the door insanely. His back stood higher than my hips, and at the time I was a small girl, and the dog just forced me back. Gunner literally prevented me from reaching the doorknob. He was gentle with me but very forceful. I yelled back to the man to leave whatever it was on the porch, but he seemed insistent. He said things like, "Can you really not just unlock the door for a minute? And come on, Randy knows me." I had to tell him I physically couldn't get past the door, so I could call the mom for him. The man got weird and said, "No, that's not necessary. I'll come back another time," and then rushed off. Anyway, the man had some distinct features, and when I described him to the mom later, she informed me that she had no idea who he was, and that she wasn't expecting anything. We never found out who he was, and he never came back. So, thanks, Gunner. And let's never meet white van hoodlums or the creepy not delivery man. This happened around 2012, but I remember most of it clear as day. It's a long read, but a post I read earlier reminded me of this incident with people I never want to run into ever again. I worked with my girlfriend at a busy restaurant. We worked all the time and it was a stressful job. We took off a few days and decided to fly somewhere to get away from work, people, and the town in general. I found decent deals and flights to Ocean City, Maryland for 2 nights. She had never been on a plane, we loved the beach, and I could hit up all the local crab cake spots. It was perfect. We flew into Baltimore and rented a car to drive to Ocean City. Nothing memorable happened the first day. We laid on the beach, hit up all the local shops, and had forgettable food. On the second full day, we woke up and went to the most recommended spot for crab cakes. On the way back, we stopped and got crab cakes to go from 2 other recommended places for later. We stopped by the hotel to drop the food off and went to the hotel bar for a few drinks. Note: my girlfriend at the time was a smoker, and I hated it. She also would attract attention from guys, which I would deal with but wasn't thrilled about. We went to the rooftop bar at the hotel. The bar itself is a 4-sided island in the middle of the patio. It was probably 2 in the afternoon on a clear, sunny day. We pulled up chairs. There were only a few women on the left side of the bar and a guy bartender behind it. We got obligatory house margaritas. After her first drink, my girlfriend felt like she wanted to smoke, but the girls and the bartender didn't have one to bum her. We got refills and schmoozed with the bartender about the area and things to do, but mainly kept to ourselves. The bartender seemed fake. Something was off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I had a feeling like I really don't even want to run to the restroom and leave her here at the bar because I didn't trust something. More than a few times he asked us if we were staying at that hotel. I think I said no, my girlfriend said yes. He asked us what room at one point. My girlfriend went to use the restroom. A minute later, I heard guys' voices. I didn't realize there was a group of 3 or 4 guys that sat at a table directly behind us. They were either playing cards or just smoking, but they made some comment to her when she walked back. Great. We finished our drinks and were Googling tropical drinks for her and area hotspots to check out. The guys came up on either side of us and talked to the bartender and got beers. You could tell they were either friends or regulars. I honestly couldn't tell you if they were there when we came to the bar or came after, but they had a sleazy vibe. My girlfriend and I ended up talking to the only other couple at the bar who had come and sat down. It was nice to be away and just relax. We always liked making new friends. I didn't realize it, but one of the guys came up and either brushed against my girl or made a comment and it rubbed her the wrong way. So in her infinite wisdom, she wanted to be bothersome to them. She got up and asked to bum a smoke. I didn't realize it until I turned around. And there she was, talking to the guy with his shirt unbuttoned and gold chains hanging on his chest hair forest. I didn't want her associating with them, but if one gave her a smoke, I would get the guy a beer if it meant we didn't have to leave the bar to hit a store for smokes. She came back without a cigarette, mad. Apparently, the guys kept asking, "What's in it for us?" and said, "Your boyfriend wants to fight us. Why would we give you anything?" I didn't want to fight them. I was on vacation and wasn't paying attention to them. But I didn't like the implication of the other comment at all. Because we had a lackluster first day, I wanted to pack in fun things that day. So this drink was my last one. I asked for the tab, and the guy from the couple we met gave us his business card. He said we should meet him and his girlfriend at Secrets at 8 in the evening. The guys behind us kind of swarmed on all sides of us and slammed on a pack of cigarettes, with only 2 smokes left inside of it, in between both my girlfriend and me. They said something like, "Here," then ordered another round. We found it odd, but I thanked them and offered a shot. I don't think they even replied. One asked if we were vacationing, then asked if we were staying at the hotel, then took the round of beers back to their table. I had a weird feeling as if they were locals and didn't like us because we were visitors. Turning back to the bar, my drink was now completely full. Stupid me didn't even question it. I didn't want a refill, but figured the bartender topped me off. I took a sip. The drink was strong. I just closed out. Maybe it was a thank you for the tip. It was disgustingly strong, like rubbing alcohol, maybe even turpentine. I told my girlfriend to try it. Boozy Susie over here took a huge pull from my drink and nearly spit it back out. It was gross. She made a face and said it shouldn't taste like that. I couldn't even ask the bartender about it. He was gone. I don't know when he disappeared, but he was nowhere to be found. I can't remember if I fully finished the nasty thing. My girlfriend said something along the lines of, "The guys are staring, let's go." I was originally worried she was going to chat them up and thank them before we left. But she said she felt weird. The whole vibe changed. She wanted out. I remember spending a minute or two saying goodbye to the couple we were going to meet later and heading towards the doors into the hotel. The guys weren't at their table. Patio door, elevator, hotel room door, bed. My eyes opened and I turned my head right. The alarm clock read 3 in the morning. I was face down in bed on top of the covers. I pushed myself up, slid back off the bed and stood up. The sliding glass doors were wide open, as were the screen doors to the balcony. There was a breeze. I thought, did my girlfriend jump off the balcony? And in that millisecond, I heard crying behind me. My girlfriend was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a clamshell of what was $40 worth of crab cakes in her lap, crying. She said she couldn't wake me up. She asked me if I remembered what happened. She said she had been sick and throwing up for 4 hours nonstop. What the hell happened? I bent over to sit down with her and got hit with a wave of sickness. I ran and was in that bathroom for hours puking. By the time I came out, she was asleep, passed out again. This had to be a bad dream. I remember thinking, maybe we went to the club and got wasted and I blacked out. I went back to bed. We both woke up at 7 in the morning to our alarms. We had to take the rental to Baltimore and catch a flight back. We both had to be at work at 2 today. I was shaking. She looked like hell. We both felt like death. She was shook. She said the walk back to the hotel room was scary and she didn't remember anything after. Wait, what? According to her, when we walked into the hotel from the bar patio, one of the guys was on a chair near the elevators. He said something to us, but the doors closed quickly. She said when we got to our floor, 2 of the guys were at the end of the hall heading toward us. She said we got in the room and they stood outside our door, and she thinks they knocked. Apparently, I laid on the bed and immediately was lights out. She couldn't wake me and passed out herself until she woke up to violently vomit for hours. My body was shot. I was shaking, and now I was processing that these scumbags maybe followed us to our room. Part of me thought she was exaggerating, but you know how you have weird slow-motion flashbacks. Well, as I was graying out on the way to the hotel room, I remembered one of the guys being by the elevator. Also, as she was brushing her teeth, her mouth was blue. I went to the mirror, so was mine, neon blue. Nothing we had that day was blue. I had light green margaritas and vodka with root beers. This was proof that something fishy had to have happened. We didn't know what to do. We had to get back. We couldn't stick around. We got to the car. I barely felt okay to drive, but I wanted to be home. We felt dirty, we were confused, and we wanted out of Maryland. We swore we were never coming back. We missed our flight, explained the situation to the desk, and somehow got put on another flight back home. We sat in the airport for hours dying. The flight was painful too. We made it to work a few hours late that day. Nobody believed our story and thought we made it up to justify being late, and we kind of never brought it up again. I Googled to see if similar situations happened and found nothing. We Googled blue tongue and saw it's a side effect of a drug. I'll be honest, I felt lucky we made it out of Ocean City. I don't know if we were a target of a room invasion or robbery, or if they wanted to attack or kidnap my girlfriend. It could have turned out ugly in a lot of different ways. What if my girlfriend didn't take a huge swig? What if I drank the whole thing by myself? How close did I come to an overdose or death depending on the drug and its interactions with alcohol? I swear the bartender was in on it. I did call the hotel and asked if there were any issues with people being drugged or room robberies there. They said no, they had 0 incidents, and I think I let it go. I emailed the hotel from a throwaway email I created and told them to watch the hotel roof bar and bartender, and never got a reply. I realize I wrote a ton, but that's my story, and I think about it anytime someone brings up Ocean City. I used to work at an adult store, and it was interesting to say the least. I was 19 at the time when I worked there. Not wanting to give too much info out, I'll just call it The Spot for now. The Spot was basically a mom and pop run chain of, I think, 12 stores. On average, it was 2 people per store. You and the other person would alternate days, so you worked literally every other day of the week from 9:30 in the morning until midnight all day by yourself. I didn't mind though. I kept myself busy and I brought a taser with me just in case. It was around 11:30 at night when I heard the basic beep notifying me someone had opened the door. When I looked up from the register to greet my rather late guest, a nauseating smell began to slowly creep up my nostrils. It was a weird, strong concoction of body odor, a barn with way too many animals in it and a hint of something very old and rotten. His choice of clothing rather complemented the smell. Those horrendously dirty boots started to flake bits of dried mud on my recently cleaned floor instantly. Faded jeans, just as bad as the boots, were caked with dried mud up to the knee, also flaking stuff everywhere. His red button-down flannel covered in dark stains was tucked in, clearly being the obvious gentleman that he was. His freckled face and sandy blonde hair were surprisingly clean though, like he had just showered and put all his dirty clothes back on. "Hi, welcome to The Spot. Is there anything you're looking for in particular this evening?" I greeted with a fake smile, trying not to look bothered by the god-awful smell. He smiled and said he needed bed restraints and wanted to browse our selection of toys that would, quote, satisfy a more sadistic pleasure. Then he flashed me another smile, this one being a bit bigger. I heard weird comments like that all the time, so I wasn't bothered. Yet. I figured he wanted to see our selection of pretty basic BDSM inventory. I showed him our 3 different restraints. He picked one out and then walked over to our little stand of whips, ball gags, and so on. I let him know that everything we had was out on the floor and that if he had any questions to let me know. That's when things got weird. Every couple of minutes he would pick up an item and ask if we had something bigger, more invasive, or more intense. Every time he asked, he wouldn't break eye contact with me, as if he didn't want to miss a single twitch of discomfort he was clearly trying to cause. Every time I stood my ground and would blankly tell him, "Sir, like I said before, unfortunately all of our items are out on the floor." But I couldn't stand it anymore when he asked for, I think, the 5th time. It was a red vinyl tarp. Something you'd see in your basic girl-on-girl wrestling match in baby oil. "Do you happen to have this in another color?" he asked, almost hopeful that we might actually have something he desperately wanted in the back. I told him we didn't have any other colors, almost desperately. It was 11:55 and I just wanted this guy out of my store. "It's a shame you don't have it in any other colors," he sighed, looking at me and waiting for a reaction. What the hell, I thought. Hopefully, if I just say something, he'll be satisfied and finally leave, so I can Febreze the hell out of the store to cover that god-awful scent and go home. So I said the only thing I ever had to say about that red vinyl tarp to customers. I'm not a huge fan of it. Personally, it makes me think of something someone would use in a snuff film. I giggled nervously at the end when I could tell by his facial expression that he thought I said something extremely unintelligent. He then chuckled and looked at me excitedly, like he was about to blow my mind with some amazing information, and I guess technically he did. "You're too sweet and young of a thing to know anything about that line of films, baby doll. But I'll be upfront with you about something. People who watch or make those movies love the gory ones. The more blood, the better. They drink that stuff up like desperately needed Monday morning coffee. So a red tarp simply wouldn't find its way into that film industry. The blood would just fade into the floor as the life fades out of the star of the movie's eyes." He paused, winked at me, and then checked his phone. I just stood there completely frozen, trying to wrap my head around what I'd just heard. But before I could even think, he gasped, "I'm sorry, it's 12:02, you need to close. I'm ready to go." He made a quick dash to the register. I instinctively followed, logging in to complete the transaction. I handed him his bag and his receipt when he decided to take a step back and look me up and down. Looking rather pleased, he asked how far I planned on going into the adult entertainment business. I said I was just interested in selling toys and that was as far as I intended. He frowned slightly. "It's a shame. You'd be a hit as the star in the upcoming film I'm producing." I laughed nervously and said I wasn't interested, and that he'd better start searching for someone else. He chuckled. "Oh, I'll come back for you, baby doll. I don't just let pretty young things like you out of my grasp. I'll be seeing you again." And with that, he slipped out the door, with me soon quickly behind him to lock it. I stood there for a couple of minutes, my hand never leaving the lock. My thoughts filled my head to capacity. I began to think of reasons why he had dark stains on his shirt and smelled so terrible. Thinking of the smell made me realize it still reeked in there. I hastily closed down the register, scanned the empty parking lot before unlocking the door, taser in one hand and keys in the other. I got to my car safely and made it home. I worked there for a couple more months and he never did come back in, so creepy, most likely a snuff producer who told me how much he and his fans loved blood, and then seemed to openly ask if I wanted to star in his upcoming film. Let's not meet. I've always wanted to post something on here because I've been reading posts on this subreddit since I was little. I can't say I'm too pleased to have an experience to post now that it has actually happened. I haven't really told anybody this story because I didn't want to freak out any of my friends, so I've limited it to just my mom and a few close friends. And now you, I guess. Let's begin. So, how my friend group works is we have our little circle of people who we hang around with most often. But for big events or bonfires or something similar, we expand and a couple of different friend groups join in. Ben is part of one of these extended friend groups. He's someone who always posts different and interesting things, who always has something to say. I've gotten along really well with Ben at these events, and we always end up chatting. I've always found him to be a different and unique individual. Ben started going to my local college this year. He sent me a Snapchat basically saying, "Hey, All my friends went away to different schools, and the only person I have to talk to from the area is my now ex-girlfriend. I was wondering if you wanted to get a group together and hang out, because I'd like to have some new friends around. It was actually a really nice message because with the course I'm in, I don't get to make many friends, and all my close friends are spread out now too. So I said yes. The hangout was initially supposed to be one of my friends, him and one of his friends. It was a day after class, and I had just gotten home. He told me he was going to take a quick nap before we all headed out. When he woke up, he told me it was now too late and he had other plans he had forgotten about. That was totally fine. I wasn't upset about it. I canceled with my friend too so I could just sit down and do some homework. He texted me a few hours later, and I didn't even give him my number, so he must have found it somehow, saying that his other plans got canceled and he was now available again, wondering if I still wanted to do something. I told him my friend was now out of the city and he said he had texted his friend, but they didn't answer. He decided to pick me up and go for a drive just to chat. Normal enough. Ben got to my house around 10 o'clock. I went and hopped into his car and he sped off. Oddly enough, he was talking in an accented voice, kind of like Jamaican or something similar. I thought he was just being goofy, so I played along. Sometimes I answered back in the accent, but then I started to think it was weird that he wasn't talking in his normal voice at all. He was driving like a maniac down the street, telling me how he had been drinking earlier because he thought he was going to a party. I asked if he was drinking and driving, and he said no, he'd only had a few sips. I know I probably should have gotten out of the car then, but at this point we were flying down the highway and I was scared. He began to rant about his ex, telling me that there was infidelity and trust issues on his end, but he couldn't tell me what they were because he didn't want me to think badly of him. He told me he was still going to marry this girl and have her children. He ranted about her, got off on tangents, and started to scream and yell. I started to think maybe he was on some kind of drug or something. We arrived at my college, about a 30 to 40 minute drive away in another city, and he said we should get out of the car. I was already scared and my phone was dying, so I just listened to what he said. At this point, I was literally thinking he might kill me. He took me for a walk through the woods, then started to make sounds like a creature. He would make dinosaur noises or sounds like The Grudge. He would also move his body in weird, creepy ways, like he was morphing into something. I asked if we could go home because I was terrified. We got back into the car and started our drive home. He pulled out a pipe and smoked something. I told him he shouldn't do that, but he didn't listen. Now he began to yell again, starting back on his tangents about life. Then he pulled over the car, got out, and started doing jumping kicks. At this point, my phone was completely dead. He got back in the car and put on his favorite song. It started slow and then picked up later. It was about a 4-minute song. He began to scream along to the lyrics, smashing the windows, the dashboard, and the steering wheel with his hands, stomping his feet. I've seen people passionate about a song before, but not like this. Ben swerved all over the road until we finally got to my house. He then turned to me and said, without the accent, "I know it's late, but did you want to have sex?" In the most casual tone in the world. I gave a nervous laugh and said, "Actually, I'm good." He turned to the back seat to get something, but I jumped out of the car and ran to my house. I locked the front door and then the door to my room just in case he tried to break in. It might not sound as terrifying as it was in the moment, but at the time I was shaking out of pure fear. I don't know if he was just on some crazy drug, or if he had a split personality or something, but I've never met someone before who made me think, you're going to kill someone someday.